All right, for art criticism number 3, we are looking at this piece right over here. It is called The Grande Vitesse, again, French. And so that's the title that you will type in right over here. Double click to start typing. The artist is Alexander Calder, who we talked about yesterday, and the date he created this was 1969. So go ahead and fill that in for the date. While you are working on those things, please pause me. When you are ready to move on to describe, unpause me. Okay, I'm assuming you're ready for describe then. We will click this lovely box right down here where it says describe. You are going to list out the things that you see in this artwork. Now the artwork is the red sculpture only. So we're not talking about I see buildings in the background and sky in the top. I want you to see what do you see in this actual sculpture, just the red sculpture. So I'm only going to have you list 3 things that you see in that sculpture. Again, pause me while you're writing those things down. Unpause me when you are ready for the Analyze section. Okay, for the Analyze section, we are going to talk about line, shape, and contrast. So the first thing that I want you to talk about is lines. What type of lines do we see here? What types, or what direction of lines, or what combinations of lines do we see? If you don't remember the vocab words that we talked about in our notes, you can pull up that notes packet in another tab because it will give you the vocab terms for the types of lines, direction of lines, and combinations of lines. Pick one of those 3 things to talk about that you see in this artwork. Tell me where those lines are and use the vocab terms. For shape, I want you to tell me what types of shapes do you see. So again, in those notes, we talked about geometric shapes, organic shapes, amorphous shapes. Which one of those exist in this artwork and where? And the last thing we're going to talk about is contrast. And I want you to tell me, like, how does this create contrast? We talked about 6 different ways of creating contrast. Contrast with color, contrast with proximity, contrast with texture, contrast with scale, contrast with 2 other things that I'm currently forgetting, but you can look up in your notes. Pick one of those things and talk about the contrast that exists in this artwork. Once you have those 3 sentences, you can move on to interpret, but in the meantime, pause me while you are typing out those. Okay, for interpret, a little backstory on this guy. The actual title in English is The Great Swiftness. And Calder talked about how it was supposed to look like it was in motion and moving from all different angles. So what I want you to interpret is how does he create a sense of movement in his stabile. We talked about how these are stationary sculptures. He also worked with mobiles. This isn't a mobile, but it still talks about movement. So how does this one make you think of movement even though it's staying still? While you type out your answer to that, go ahead and pause me and unpause me when you are ready for judgment. Okay, for the judgment of this one, we're not going to talk about imitationalism because that's obviously not a thing. And I'm not even going to talk so much about formalism. I want to talk about emotionalism, and I want you to tell me whether or not you think this makes you feel something when you look at it. If it makes you feel something, then it's going to be a successful artwork. If it doesn't make you feel anything, then it is a non-successful artwork or an unsuccessful artwork. Once you have filled that in, go ahead and click Submit in Schoology, and you'll be all set with this art criticism.